Welcome to our ambassador interview webzine. My name is Yvonne Kim, and I'm the executive director of Asia Society Korea. Today, it is my honor to interview Ambassador of Australia, Her Excellency Catherine Raper. Ambassador Raper arrived in Seoul on December 16th, 2020. Your Excellency, thank you for agreeing to take the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Your post as Ambassador to the Republic of Korea carries symbolic importance as you are the first female Australian ambassador assigned to this country. You have already emphasized that you wish to connect with other female leaders during your time here, and we are wondering how that is going on, how that's been going, and if there's any particular issue that you're interested in when it comes to gender or women's rights. So let's start with that.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, and it's a great pleasure to be able to speak with you today and through you to the wider Asia Society. And I'm sure we'll have a good discussion today, and I hope that's of interest to people who follow us online. Yes, it's a great privilege to be Australia's first female ambassador to the Republic of Korea. I definitely feel that is an enormous honour, an important platform from which I really do hope to make a positive contribution on gender equality and women's issues while I'm here in Seoul. So in terms of, what motivates me, I'm really interested in exploring ways that we can have conversations about how all genders in society can contribute to their full potential. Now, this is more important than ever with COVID-19, where we've seen that the pandemic has had a disproportionate effect on women and girls. We've certainly seen that a lot of the industries most affected by the lockdown and social distancing measures associated with the very valid response to the pandemic has impacted on the industries which are predominantly full of female employees. So obviously our healthcare sector has been hard at work in the front line of this pandemic, while at the same time we've seen a lot of service industries such as retail, where it's been hard for women with employment in those industries to feel very secure. So we're very keen to have a conversation about ways that we can look at the role of women in building back from COVID-19. And indeed, that's one of the topics that Australia has proposed to work together with Korea and our other MICTA partners on the role of women in the COVID-19 recovery. Here at the embassy, we're trying to play our part. We have our Women in Leadership Action Plan. Our first one was endorsed back for International Women's Day in March. And we were also launched a video here on Instagram, if anyone hasn't seen it, for the Choose to Challenge Inequality theme for International Women's Day, which is quite a powerful video. And my own Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade also has women in leadership and tackling issues such as unconscious bias, an important part of our project. Turning to women and the business community, certainly we're keen to spread the word that having more diversity in the leadership of a business is good for the business bottom line. So we're definitely seeing increasing studies which are showing that having more women representation on company boards and in leadership position leads to a significant increase in company market share. So keen to keep spreading that word as well. I would also say that in my role here as a female leader, I'm very conscious of the importance of role models. So it's very true that people can't be what they can't see. So I'm very keen to demonstrate that my role is one that is open to and eligible to all women out there to aspire to take on a leadership role. So those are just a few of the ways that certainly I'll be taking this forward. There's also a lot of work that Australia is doing both in our region through our development cooperation program and indeed through our global advocacy to increase the representation of women and working on women's empowerment issues. So it is a very important thing both to me and to the Australian government.
I mean, you've certainly been keeping yourself very busy since your arrival, and you're certainly making a huge impact especially in the women leader industry, and which is great to hear. And you arrived here in the midst of the global pandemic, and Australia obviously is ranked the third best country to be in the coronavirus era. And we understand that you formerly headed Australia's COVID-19 coordination unit. So could you please tell us a little about your previous post in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and how Australia has come to handle this global public health crisis so effectively?
Of course. Well, for 6 months last year, from March to September, I was head of the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade's COVID-19 Coordination Unit. It was probably the busiest 6 months of my life. In the early days, it was all about trying to make sense of what was happening. So my job, the job of my team, was effectively to take the avalanche of information coming out on the pandemic and how countries were responding, be it treatment or tracking, social distancing, lockdown, etc., and present that information in a form that Australian decision makers could use to ensure that Australia was following best practice and learning from the experiences elsewhere. In those early days of the pandemic, if you might remember, my team also played a key role in smoothing out various supply issues related to PPE in those days where it was hard to find a face mask or more medically suitable PPE for use by our frontline workers. So very much we learnt from the experiences elsewhere that it was important to have a very targeted and early response to COVID-19, and Korea's example was an important one for Australia there. So Australia's success can be put down really to an early decision to close our borders and operate mandatory quarantine in government facilities. So only returning Australians and others with an exception to travel have been able to come. That's obviously had the consequence of shutting down a lot of Australia's very important trade and contact with the outside world. So it won't be something that can last forever. But as a result, with a population of 25 million, our total caseload over the course of the pandemic is still less than 30,000, which is an excellent outcome and one that the Australian public is keen to preserve. So I think we're going to have to watch with the vaccine rollout how we can start to have a slow and careful reopening of the borders. So. In fact, just this weekend, on April 19, Australia and New Zealand will be opening our first two-way quarantine-free travel arrangement. And that was something that I worked on back last year. I was negotiating the arrangements for that. And the fact that it has taken so long for two countries as close geographically and values-wise, culture-wise, as Australia and New Zealand, both with excellent records in COVID-19 to take this step, I think just shows how difficult even this next stage is going to be of getting the world back to having more regularised travel supporting our trade and investment interests in order to get back to some sense of where we were before COVID-19.
I can't even imagine what that job must have been like. But perhaps the sense of safety and security that makes Australia one of the most popular destinations for Koreans thinking about working or studying abroad. Australia is now home to approximately 170,000 Koreans and a land of opportunity for many of our students and participants of the Working Holiday program. And international students are probably one of the demographics suffering the most during this crisis. Experts are saying Australia's university sector is unlikely to recover from the pandemic this year, but how do you expect Australia to cope with this challenge going forward?
Well, before the pandemic hit, Australia had become the world's third largest provider of international education, and we very much appreciated the strong interest from Koreans to come and study and work and do working holidays in Australia. So certainly it's a very welcoming environment in Australia for those seeking those experiences. And we are definitely going to work hard and look forward to welcome new students back to Australia's classrooms and campuses and communities when border conditions allow. But that's going to take some planning because, as I mentioned, the borders in Australia are still shut. So there was very careful discussions happening between Australian Commonwealth and states and territories about how we can bring back our future students, future international students. So we need to be absolutely guided by the expert health advice, and the vaccine rollout will also be an important part of that equation. But yes, it is likely to be a January 2022 issue before we can start actually having students physically back in the classroom. But all is not lost. In the meantime, we're doing a lot of work to promote online education, and we're very much encouraging international students to continue enrolling in Australian education providers and commence their studies online. What that means is they can start the visa application process and then be first in the queue and ready to travel to Australia when the border situation changes. So that's proving a very effective option for many international students. And indeed, one of the positive side effects of COVID-19 has been some real innovation in education delivery. So we're seeing so many people being able to sign up for courses that might have been difficult to access previously, and embracing the technology as a way to grow their learning opportunities. We'll also be in Australia having a really good look at our international education strategy, and our Minister for Education and Youth, Alan Tudge, has just launched a new consultation process to make sure that we're well placed for that. So my message is enrol, study online, and we'll have you back as soon as we can.
Let's change the subject a little bit, but staying with the pandemic. Australia celebrated its National Day on January 26th, which marks an event that took place in 1788. But surprisingly, it took nearly 200 years for the public holiday to be nationally commemorated, starting in 1994. So what can you tell us about this national holiday and how it's celebrated? Has pandemic changed how this day was celebrated in your home country or here or worldwide?
Well, Australia Day is on 26th of January. And it's very much a day that we use in Australia to reflect on what it means to be Australian. So we celebrate contemporary Australia, we celebrate modern, diverse, multicultural Australia, and we acknowledge our history. So it's seen as an opportunity to really reflect, respect, and connect with other Australians. Now, Australia Day has actually been celebrated right throughout Australia's history. It actually goes back to the early 19th century and was originally a celebration for emancipated convicts, remembering that the European settlement of Australia began as a convict colony. And it's evolved through the 200 years since then into being very much that celebration of contemporary Australia today that we use to celebrate the cultural diversity of Australia. Now, it is a day that also, as I said, a need to acknowledge our history, and we're working hard to try and make our National Day something that all Australians can be sure to recognise the importance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, our Indigenous peoples, to our nation. So it's also a recognition and a celebration of their contribution. And indeed, not just Australia Day, but just about every event in Australia begins with an acknowledgement of country, which pays our respects to our Indigenous peoples and their amazing contribution, history, and cultural continuity. Now, how we've celebrated, of course, has been affected by COVID-19, and I know you've been in Seoul for some years, and be aware that generally we've had a big event at the embassy to celebrate that. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible this year, but we did still mark the day virtually. We did a series of online and social media events. In Australia, where the COVID-19 numbers are next to zero in terms of our community transmission, I wasn't in Australia for Australia Day this year, but I know from pictures online of my friends and family, it's traditionally celebrated outdoors with a barbecue, Australian lamb on the hot plate, and generally some Australian dessert like Lamingtons or pavlova to follow that up. So it's very much a family day, a day of community, a day of being with your friends and family and celebrating modern Australia.
Well, barbecue and Australian lamb sounds Oh, definitely great to me. Well, lastly, this year marks the 60th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Korea and Australia. We've been friends for a long time, and the two nations have been developing and expanding cooperative relations in a whole range of areas as friends and partners with shared values, not to mention the special bond that was forged on the battlefields when the Australian Armed Forces joined the Korean War. So, what can we expect of Australia-ROK relations over the next 10 years? So what do you envision?
Well, we're very pleased to be celebrating the 60th anniversary of Australia and Korean diplomatic relations this year. And we definitely want to make a splash this year and show that the Australia-Korea relationship has a very strong history and a very firm foundation, but also a really vibrant future and looking ahead at how we can continue to develop our relationship over the next 60 years. So it's going to involve a bit of reflection, but very much we'll be also looking forward. So in the political or foreign relations sphere, Australia and Korea are very much natural partners. We have a lot in common, both like-minded democracies, rely on free trade and the rule of law. We both value human rights. We are both allies of the US and have China as our major trading partner. And we also have both of us deep connections to Southeast Asia. So there's a lot of additional cooperation that we and that Australia and Korea can do together to meet the opportunities and challenges of our shared Indo-Pacific region. So we're both looking at what we can do to contribute to the type of region that we want to live in. We share an interest in having a region that's open, stable, inclusive, and prosperous. Those are more than just adjectives. They're actually something that you need to work at to make sure that you're creating the type of region that meets the values and the interests of Australia and Korea. So we're really looking at ways that we can do more together, act more cohesively, more consistently, and more often to pull in the same direction in terms of our common approaches. So we're looking at things such as pursuing strategic and defence cooperation and more cooperation in Southeast Asia and with ASEAN countries in particular. In the economic sphere, our economic cooperation over the last 60 years has really grown from strength to strength. And there it's been the fact that our economies are very complementary. So we've established a long-term partnership in energy and resources and have well-established supply chains and commercial links. So, it's a truism that Australia supplied Korea with the iron ore, the coal and the gas that Korea's used to build this blossoming, sophisticated, dynamic society and economy that we see around us. And Australia's been very happy to take the cars and the electronic devices that Koreans make so well. At the same time, the food and agriculture trade has been very important. So we've been very reliable providers of safe and green meat and horticultural products to Korea. And pleasingly, some of that is now using Korea's own domestic production. So Australia sends wheat to Korea, and then we've got ramen noodles coming the other way. So it's a real win-win situation there. But what we're looking at now is a way that we can build on those existing partnerships and supply chains to do more together on low emissions technology. And that has the benefit of addressing climate change and our needs to build more sustainable economies and societies. So we're looking at investments that can accelerate emissions reductions and support our jobs and communities, including as they recover from this pandemic. So we're looking at cooperation in research and development of the technologies that lower emissions and ways that we can have build on that technology to have practical and commercially viable investments and trade and technologies that can really drive the transition to net zero. And that includes in areas such as hydrogen, carbon capture storage, manufacture of green steel. So we're already seeing some really good cooperation on hydrogen, and we think we're well placed to do more and become a supplier of hydrogen to Korea. Korea, of course, is also have real strengths in electric vehicles and batteries, and there Australia's critical minerals and rare earths can play an important part in that. Another field is biotech pharmaceuticals. Korea is a global leader in that field, and Australia has expertise in early phase clinical trials. So again, a complementarity that allows us to have our corporate sectors work together. And then also in the economic sphere, we've long been partners in international organisations, WTO, APEC, the G20, and that really is about the rules-based system that supports all of those earlier commercial links that I mentioned. I might just finish on defence, because you mentioned our partnership was forged on the battlefield, and there's an estimated 2,500 Korean War veterans still alive in Australia. Their average age is 90, so they're definitely an elderly population. And we're very careful and conscious at the embassy of continuing to mark and commemorate the contribution that they made. And indeed, this year is the 70th anniversary of the Battle of Gapyeong, in which Australia lost 32 men, with another 59 wounded and 3 taken prisoners. So it's actually one of the most significant battles in Australian military history, and it was very much about the defence of Seoul, so an important event all round. So we've got a mini exhibition that will be commemorating Australia's involvement in this battle. We're going to be physically displaying it at the National War Memorial here in Seoul from the 22nd to the 28th of April. But it's also going to be online to enable more people to see it. And one of the interesting aspects of it is it will commemorate the Australian contribution, but it's also going to look at the very close cooperation between Korean and Australian soldiers during the Korean War, the so-called CATCOM, the Korean Augmentation to the Commonwealth Division. So it will show that our partnership was very much one where we were side by side in that area. Now, as I mentioned, the average age of our veterans is 90, and with COVID-19, that means it's unfortunately just too hard, too risky for the veterans to come to Korea this year. So we're going to be live streaming our ceremony so that veterans around the world, including in Australia, will be able to join in. So again, it's one of the things that we're able to do much better with COVID-19 is live streaming would have seemed a possibility in the past. Now we're all doing it as a matter of course, but that will help spread the word and also share the experience.
Well, you arrived in December, but we understand that you've been keeping yourself very, very busy during the past 4 months. And you just mentioned ramen. Food is always something really great to talk about. And I'm not sure if we're being a good influence by exporting ramen to Australia. It's a very dangerous and addictive thing. But I really hope that you have had a chance to explore some good, really healthy restaurants here, and that you have been enjoying your first 4 months of your stay in Korea. So, Your Excellency, thank you again for taking your time for us. And we have 2 offices in Australia, and we've been collaborating on a number of global initiatives. So we will be reaching out to you and your embassy a lot, and we look forward to working more closely with you. So it is always our honor to have you both with us, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much. I'm definitely enjoying exploring Seoul and getting to know the local cuisine here, and looking forward to getting further afield too in due course. So thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you today, and look forward to doing further activities together.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and it's been our honor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.